This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by Executive Suite Squared by ATG, offering private and shared office space with 24/7 secured access, 3 state-of-the-art conference rooms, shared lounge and cafe area, receptionist, printing center, and fiber optic internet access with Wi-Fi throughout. Conveniently located just south of 8094 at the Kennedy Avenue exit at 2901 Carlson Drive in Hammond, Indiana. For information on how you can become a member, go to executivesuites2.com or call 219-844-2901. Executive Suites Squared, home to the Bill and Callie Show.
Well, welcome to our show, and with us today we have Michael Finney, who is an author, and he has authored a book titled, you want to tell us a bit about your book and yourself, Michael?
Yeah, so the book is called 1893, Chicago's Columbian Exposition. It is a photographic look back at the World's Fair that occurred on the south side of Chicago in the year of 1893 to commemorate what would be 401 years after Columbus crossed the Atlantic and came to the lands that would be the Americas.
And so this is when did this actually hit print?
Okay, so the book itself came out last August, right? But the whole project started as a Twitter thread in the tail end, I guess the last third 2018. So I posted 125 photos of the Columbian Exposition in a long form thread over the last 125 days of what would be the 125th anniversary of the original event.
Wow, man, amazing. And are these photos that you've obtained somehow, or was it more of a collaboration?
So the photos are ones that I took and kind of processed from a book that is official government photographs of the event. So the book is from 1893 itself. It's kind of a large coffee table sized book. And there are hundreds and hundreds of photos in there. I didn't post everything. I just posted, that was kind of the mission was, 125 photos over the course of 125 days. And about 2/3 of the way through, I started to say, wow, I've got a lot of images here, and I've got a lot of little snippets of, blurbs and just kind of text that was associated with what was happening in the image, or sometimes I would kind of expound on my own ideas a little bit. So I started gathering them up and put them into a Dropbox document. And I looked at that and I had thousands of words and I wasn't even finished yet. And a lot of those were just fragments of sentences or just thoughts, and they weren't even fleshed out and they weren't really paragraphs. So as I kept going along, I kept, keeping good records of the imagery and what I was writing. And obviously I started to write more densely and more completely about each photo that I was posting. And by the end, I said, okay, there's probably a narrative in here somewhere. So I started to really kind of like shuffle things around and see where pieces fit together, and ended up with, I think there are 12 chapters that talk about the architecture and a lot of the art and the culture that occurred there. And obviously, a look at all of the countries and the buildings that were present there, because it's just an amazing story.
Yeah, it definitely is. The amount of architecture that, looking at through the pictures that it's just amazing that any type of structures went up for a fair of this size. Right. Does your book get into the historical frame, the context that this happened within?
Yeah, so there was actually, just to tie things into now, there was actually an economic panic going on in the early 1890s, and the World's Fair had such strong employment for construction workers and contractors of that nature that the Chicago area was kind of insulated against a lot of the economic downturns that occurred at that point. And I don't want to make any political statements about that. It's just the nature of what happened,
Mm-hmm.
at least within the Chicago area. But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things that came out of that event. I think the main point I try to make there is that, it's the doorstep of the 20th century. Many products, consumer goods, and services and industrial practices were introduced to people in both a business sense and a domestic sense at this event, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, juicy fruit was made there. Pabst Blue Ribbon, can mark its history starting at the event as well. They won a blue ribbon, which is why they have the blue ribbon to this day. Um, a lot of things kind of come out of that. Electric light. This was the first World's Fair and first large scale demonstration of electric light.
Mm-hmm.
Just a huge list of great achievements to make this thing go off.
Now, the buildings. What are there still the buildings exist from that, or have they all been razed?
No, so there was a fire that occurred and destroyed a lot of buildings. Most of these buildings were just kind of skeletons that were
Right.
covered over on the exterior to make them look complete, but they were actually, they weren't supposed to be permanent structures or, used for very long periods of time. However, there are a number of structures that are still in existence. The primary one, that I focus on, and I go back around the city and take modern and juxtapose against some of these older images from 1893. The number one building to me is what we know as the Museum of Science and Industry, and back in 1890, the Art Palace. So there were 150 rooms of art from all over the world on display, from many private collections, and nations had contributed to put art on display at this event. And then the Art Institute itself downtown was actually built for the event as well. So it was the world's auxiliary. So it was kind of a meeting place. But immediately after the event was closed, it turned into the Art Institute of Chicago. So structurally, that main entrance where the lions are,
Mm-hmm.
those lions were sculpted by Edward Kenny, and he also contributed some other artwork to the event as well. So the lions are historic. The building, can mark its history back to there. Another museum, the Field Museum, while that building was built in the 1920s, a lot of the initial collection that launched that museum comes from the 1893 World's Fair. So a lot of artifacts, right, that were in the manufacturers building, as I understand, which was basically a trade show area for all these different nations and cultures, found their way to the Field Museum ultimately. So a lot of those things are cataloged there. Some of them are on display.
Yeah, yeah. I know a lot of architects look at that revolution, the design, even though some of these buildings were just temporary. Some of the designs have been mimicked during that industrial age where Chicago began developing, and some of the buildings that kind of mimicked that architectural form, like the cultural center, which happened to be the first library in Chicago. All mimicked off some of those buildings. So it had a phenomenal architectural impact for years to come after the exposition itself. Um,
Right.
so, which is amazing that you went back and cataloged all this. And so, let me ask you about as far as book availability. Do you go out and do book signings, or do you hold events, online events, to talk about this book?
Yeah, so I have not gone out and done any events, and I'm probably not going to go out and do any events in the short term, um,
Mm.
as it is right now. However, yeah, I have signed a number of books for friends and family, and that's been really awesome. Because it's just a nice thing to have a physical manifestation of this thing that
Yeah,
you've worked on.
definitely.
Um, so there's a couple of other offshoots to the project as well. I launched a online merchandise store. So I took some of the images and have put them on cups and phone cases and shirts and
Hmm.
tapestries and things like that. So you can bring some of it home if you're interested. And then also I am following this up with, so there's a print edition, there's an ebook edition, and then I did an audio book edition. And you might say, well, who wants to listen to a picture book? Well, I mean, there's still a story there, so there
Right.
is something to be said about it. And also, that vocal, right, that audio is being used as the voiceover for the documentary video that I'm turning this into currently. So that's
Hmm.
underway as well. I'm
Uh,
hoping to get that out as soon as possible. I don't have a release date currently. I wish I could, you know, pin something down, but I'm kind of learning as I go. Not so much the video editing portion of things, but very much the distribution aspect. And
hmm.
I wouldn't mind, submitting it to some film fests if there's a few that are kind of moving their dates out in the future. We'll be looking at what opportunities are available out there.
So documentary. It's interesting because I can't think of any documentary that I recall that was done on the buildings or the event itself. So, um,
Well, there's a couple out there.
oh, there are.
There's
Okay.
Yeah, so there's one very popular one which is called Magic of the White City, I think. But it's actually narrated by Gene Wilder, so I'm definitely
Okay.
not going to beat his performance. But hopefully, I am able to some light on a few different things, and I think that there's some information and maybe some images that I've been able to dig up, and I continue to find and dig up as I'm researching and putting this thing together. So I've got a very rough edit of the video currently, but there's still a whole lot of editing and audio work in terms of scoring it or just putting
Yeah.
music into places that
Yeah,
still has to
definitely.
occur.
Yeah, it's not an easy task. Could you, and if you can't, I totally understand, but is it possible to share some of the pictures?
Uh, yeah, I mean, so a lot of the original images, they're in public domain. So
Right.
this is not something that I can necessarily claim ownership of. My edits, I mean, obviously, they're gonna look the way that they do, and I try to make edits not to alter the image, but hopefully make it a little more vibrant or a little higher contrast so you can see some detail and things like that without losing the integrity of the image, because that is important to me, as
Right.
somebody who likes photography too. I don't want to necessarily be presenting a falsified version of what the thing really was. As for right now, I don't actually have any of the images on my computer because I keep them on an external drive because
Yeah.
this thing has
That's
actually
fine. Yeah.
just ballooned in
Yeah.
terms of size. So I've had to move everything to an external drive to keep my computer kind of freed up as I work through everything.
And, and
But yeah, so a lot of them, the original thread is in my Twitter moments, and I can post a link as a response here
okay.
inside of this thing. So at the very least, um, people can follow that up and see for themselves. Let's see. I think here we go. So there's two moments, and they kind of connect together. So let's yeah, there we go. I think this will do it. Um, yeah, drop a comment on here. I think that should give it to you. Yeah, so there's a comment on the original post for your page
Okay.
now, and I think that'll take people directly into that Twitter moment.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Um, Boy. All
Yeah.
right. So what do you you say you have a couple other projects? Do you plan on doing any other like books as a follow up to this?
I am working on a few other photography books, primarily my stuff, and I'm working on a couple other manuscripts that are a little more different. So this was something that just kind of I fell backwards into this project, and I've
Hmm.
really always liked the story of the Columbian Exposition, and to be able to take the time to research it and learn more and more about it as I kind of keep delving deeper into the history of the event has been great. Um, I was nowhere near as informed about this thing as I was before, and to speak to some of what you're talking about in terms of the architecture, there's some just massive figures that were involved with this thing.
Hmm.
Daniel Burnham, obviously, anybody who has read Devil in the White City will be familiar with the name of Daniel Burnham, but Chicagoans also are probably at least generally familiar with the concept of the Burnham Plan, which was, his contribution to uh, keeping the Chicago downtown area nice and visitable, and promote green spaces and also connectivity. And then Lewis Sullivan, who has built a number of great structures and primarily performance spaces as well. So, like, he was really well known for designing and building theaters, right?
Mm.
And his main contribution, well, I think his only contribution to the 1893 World's Fair was the transportation building, and it was uh, aesthetically different than any of the other buildings on the grounds, and it's one of my favorite. Unfortunately, we can't see it authentically in color as it was then, but there are some nice colorized versions, and just in terms of design and structure, he just had a great, unique style.
Mm. So let me ask you this: what is your background? What are you? Did you start this out as a photographer, or are you truly an author that you happen to be a photographer? I mean, what angle did you enter this from?
So I kind of entered it as just a passion project. It was just something that I was doing for myself to challenge myself to post every single day on Twitter and be able to
Hmm.
share what I thought were really great images. I don't have any other books out. This is my first one, but it has definitely uh, led me to think more holistically about my writing and how it can be used, um, and kind of edited and regathered as I continue to create new things. So some of the other books that I'm working on right now are focused on travel and my photography, and I'm hoping to get one of those out, when I'm finished with the documentary.
Hmm.
So they're in process. They're actually already being worked on, but as I've realigned into the video project, obviously I'm giving it priority because I want it to come out.
Right, right. I mean, it's well, it sounds like you're walking across all media levels here: a documentary, writing, a picture, book, and uh, so people can get this on Amazon. Is that
Right.
correct? And so we were going to provide a link for it on Amazon. And is there anywhere else? Could they get it from like a privately owned used bookstore or private bookstore?
If that bookstore wanted to order them, they would have to do it through Amazon currently.
Okay.
I don't have any other publisher.
All right.
I did reach out to a couple of publishers, but I think that maybe they weren't interested in taking a risk on a
A
novice
new
writer.
author. Yeah.
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 So, hey, if there are any publishers out there that want to rerun the book, I'd be happy to talk about that because I'm not going to stop with this project. I'm going to keep rolling with it.
Awesome.
Obviously.
Awesome.
And I already have the second edition because there were a couple of errors I didn't have an editor. I did it myself. So
Uh,
there are a couple of errors in there. And obviously I have a lot of new images that I'm gathering for the video. So technically, this could grow into a larger book that's more comprehensive and, maybe even a nicer print or something like that. Maybe a hardback edition or something along those lines might be in the cards in the future. I'm not promising anything. I'm just kind of speculating about what options there are out there. But as it is today, the second edition is ready to go once the video is out. And, I'll kind of follow up with things as the opportunities provide themselves.
all right. Well, definitely let us know when the documentary is out in wherever it may post, whenever it drops, and we'll have you on again, and we can show video or whatever you would like to do as a portion, just snippets or what have you. Listen, we probably need to wrap up the show here. Time is running short, but boy, we appreciate you reaching out to us and sharing this about your book. Anyone who has any interest in architecture from a historical standpoint should definitely look at this. I mean, we're talking about architecture that to this day has still had a ripple effect on design today. So I find it very interesting, so please look him up. His name is Michael Finney. Do you have any other information you want to share about the book?
No, just that it's available in print, an
Right.
ebook, and an audiobook version. Um, if there's anybody that's interested in reaching out about, ideas or contributing or working together on something, I'm open to that as well.
And they can get a hold of you on Twitter
Yeah, Twitter or even here on Facebook. There's my page is linked there, so you can message my page, and that's ideal.
All right. Great. Well, Michael, again, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you reaching out to us and sharing information about your book. We wish you all the success and success forthcoming in the documentary that you'll be producing. And boy, look forward to it.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Bill.
Thank you. And with that, we'll say goodbye for now.
This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by Executive Suite Squared by ATG, offering private and shared office space with 24/7 secured access, 3 state-of-the-art conference rooms, shared lounge and cafe area, receptionist, printing center, and fiber optic internet access with Wi-Fi throughout. Conveniently located just south of 8094 at the Kennedy Avenue exit at 2901 Carlson Drive in Hammond, Indiana. For information on how you can become a member, go to executivesuites2.com or call 219-844-2901. Executive Suites Squared, home to the Bill and Callie Show.